Number 15. The Dancing Plague of 1518. In July 1518, a woman named Fra Trofe turned onto a narrow street in Strasbourg and began dancing. Not a waltz, breakdance, or foxtrot, but a tortured, spasm-like involuntary dance fever that gripped her for days. It started off seeming to be an isolated case of psychosis, but Trofe's dance began to seem contagious. By the end of the week, 34 others have joined her in her dance. Within a month, the crowd of the dancing, hopping, and leaping individuals had increased to 400 people. Within a month, the crowd of dancing, hopping, and leaping individuals had increased to 400 people who were infected with the, quote, dancing plague. What's just as strange is that Frau Trofe should have been dead through dehydration just after 3 days max. But she remained dancing for presumably 6 days while she was dead. According to theory, physical exertion of this extreme is not naturally possible to maintain. Even the best of marathon runners would not last. Most of the infected died, many of dehydration, exhaustion, heart attacks, and strokes, which seem to be common side effects of the plague. As strange as this event sounds, it is widely recorded. Most historians believe that this is a case of mass hysteria, but the true reason why people had danced to their deaths will forever be unknown. Number 14. The Mary Celeste. One of the greatest maritime mysteries of all time is the story of the Mary Celeste. On December 4th, 1872, the ship was discovered floating in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. David Morehouse was taken by surprise to discover that the Mary Celeste was still under Genoa, Italy, even though it had left from New York 8 days before him, and should have already arrived. Morris sent a boarding party to the ship. When they arrived, there was no one on deck, and below decks, the ship's charts were missing, but the crew's belongings were still in the rooms. The ship's only lifeboat was missing, and one of the water pumps had been destroyed, but there was barely any damage to the ship except for some water sloshing in the ship's bottom. But the cargo of 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol unharmed. Even weirder, there was a 6-month supply of food and water left untouched. The crew had simply vanished. The ship had little to no damage. There was no risk of sinking, and it was full of food and water and supplies. There's no indication of why the crew would jump ship. That's the main mystery associated with the ship, but not the only one. Firstly, the Mary Celeste wasn't even the ship's first name. Her original name was the Amazon, but that had to be changed after 3 captains died aboard the ship, as well as random fires breaking out. Number 13. The Library of Alexandria's full collection. The Library of Alexandria was basically the mass data storage for around 8 straight centuries. It was where all great works of the ancient world were stored. It was packing around 1 million scrolls. Poetry, philosophy, science, history, drama, it had everything in it. The library was the best storage of information, and there are many stories on who burned the library. Some thought it was ironically the man named Peter the Reader. Others believe that the fire was accidentally caused by Julius Caesar. It is alleged that during Caesar's occupation of the city of Alexandria in 48 BCE, he found himself in the royal palace, helmed in by an Egyptian fleet in the harbor. For his own safety, he had his men set fire to the Egyptian fleet, but the fire got out of control and spread through the parts of the city nearest the shore, which included warehouses, depots, and some arsenals. Imagine what the world would have been like if the untold wealth of information this library contained had survived. There could be great advancements in science, math, etc. in the world we know today. Once the largest library in the ancient world, containing works by the greatest thinkers of antiquity, including Homero, Plato, Socrates, and many more that will remain a mystery that will never be solved. It is quite painful to read. For example, Archias of Samos totally figured out that the earth revolved around the sun in the 3rd century BCE, but his proof was in the library's collection. But we'll never know how he discovered such a revolutionary breakthrough all those millenniums ago. Number 12. The Lost Colony of Roanoke. In the early days of the colonization of the Americas, it was not uncommon for people to go missing in the wilderness. But then a whole colony vanished. That was unthought of, and it happened at Roanoke Island, North Carolina in August 1950. The colony was established 3 years before an estimated 115 English settlers led by Governor John White. John White departed to England for more supplies a few months after his arrival, leaving his family behind. But just as he arrived in England, a major naval war broke out between the Spanish and the English, prompting Queen Elizabeth I to call on every available ship to confront the mighty Spanish Armada. White was prevented from returning to his family for 3 years because of this political turmoil in Europe. But when he finally did come back to Roanoke, nobody was to be found. The entire colony had vanished into thin air. The only thing left was the word Crotano, carved into a tree. Crotano was the name of the island near the Roanoke. which was home to a Native American tribe. There are many theories on what happened to the colony. Maybe they were killed or abducted by Native Americans. Another theory is that they tried to sail back to England on their own and got lost at sea, or that they had met a bloody end at the hands of Spaniards who had marched further up from Florida. It is within the possibilities that they moved further inland and were absorbed into a friendlier tribe, but there is still no real consensus about what happened from 1587 to 1590 in the fledgling settlement, which is one of the spookiest unsolved mysteries in American history. Number 11. Who was Kasper Hauser? On May 28, 1828, as a major holiday, the streets of Nuremberg were almost empty. Between 4 and 5 o'clock in the afternoon, a shoemaker who lived in Reupload Square noticed a strange boy of between 15 and 18 years old, dressed in a coarse peasant clothing, who was walking strangely as if drunk. When approached, he handed the man a letter addressed to the military captain. He could barely speak, walk, or use his fingers, and was wowed by the simple sensation of cooked food and fine clothing. The boy appeared to be in extreme pain and wept continuously, pointing at his feet. The shoemaker and his servants tried to talk to him, but the only answers he got were, "I don't know, and I would like to be a rider the way my father was." When finally presented to the military captain, he was spellbound at the captain's uniform, but like everyone else, the captain could get no sense from the boy. Finally, he was given a piece of paper and a pen, and to everyone's surprise printed Kasper Hauser and mature writing. He was adopted into a family and educated somewhat, eventually being able to communicate that he had spent his entire childhood locked up in a dungeon. Adding to the cloud of mystery, Kasper was stabbed to death on December 14th, 1833, after 2 other unsuccessful attempts on his life. The theory is that he might have been high-born and locked away at a young age, and eventually murdered so to be taken out of the consideration for a royal title. This is one of those mysteries that can't be easily summed up and will remain a mystery. Number 10. The location of Agade. Nearly 2,000 years before the Romans began a conquering empire, the Akkadian Empire was in full swing, stretching from the Mediterranean to the center of the modern-day Iran. It was the stronghold of cultural activity. It produced sculptures and paintings that were so far ahead of their time, they're now considering the pinnacle of ancient artwork. A strong literary transition sprung up, leading to the preservation of the oldest Semitic dialect known to historians. At the center of this empire was the city of Agade, the original source of the Akkadian culture, and one of the most important places in this ancient area. The empire has influenced events as far away as Babylon and modern-day Oman. Even today, we have no idea what happened to this powerful empire. All we know is that it collapsed, possibly as a result of an invasion, but it could have been anything. We don't even know where its capital used to stand. Its location has not yet been confirmed, although scholars have proposed a number of different sites. Most recent proposals point to the location of the Tigris, but we've so far found nothing to indicate where the greatest city of the period once stood. Until something turns up, Agade's location and fate will remain a total mystery. Number 9. The literature of the Indus civilization. Around the same time as the rise of the Akkadian Empire, a new civilization was rising up on the plains of modern-day Pakistan, known today as the Indus civilization. It was stunningly advanced for its area. They had writings over 1,000 years before the rest of India, and their scribes may have invented printings for over 1,500 years before the Chinese, and 1,700 years before the Europeans. Unfortunately, we'll never know what was being printed, because Indus script is completely indecipherable. The only thing that historians are sure of is that it is indeed a language, although even that is frequently argued. Almost all of the artifacts containing Indus writing rarely feature more than 5 characters, so it's been argued that it is not truly a genuine language. While most experts disagreed with this statement, until a genius codebreaker appears, we're still in the position whether deciphering whatever they wrote is next to impossible. What's hiding behind those symbols could be anything. Administrative documents, prayers, fragments of stories, or possibly the location of Agade. Whatever it is, it gives us an unequal amount of info on one of the history's greatest cultures. Number 8. The Fate of Boudicca, a gigantic Celtic warrior queen who destroyed the capital of Rome and Britain, sacked London, and according to the Roman historian Cornelius Tacitus, her army killed as many as 7,000 civilians in Rome, rushing to cut throats, hang, burn, and crucify. Boudicca remained a household name nearly 2,000 years after her death. Her name means victory. Some say that she died after an epic battle with the Romans, but how she died, and where she was buried, and where the battle was even held are all a mystery. Tradition also states Boudicca drank poison after her horrendous military defeat, but we have no evidence towards this beyond Tacitus' account. The Greek writer Diocletius claimed that she died from an illness. According to Dios, she had a lavish burial, which is the origin of the rumor that she is currently held somewhere under King Cross Station. But this is most likely false because it goes against nearly everything we know about the death customs of the Iron Age Britons. Even the site of her famous defeat has been lost to history, which is incredible because it would have been a battle that shaped Britain for the next few hundred years and killed over 80,000 people. Number 7. What Genghis Khan looked like. Genghis Khan was the founder and the ruler of the largest and most powerful empire in history. Everything about him is so well studied that hopefully the age-old mystery surrounding him, like the location of his tomb, may soon be solved. There is one puzzle that we have been guaranteed to never solve. We have no idea what the Great Khan looked like, which is incredible for a narcissist who killed so many millions of people it affected the planet's climate. The Khan left clues as to what he looked like. Not a single portrait or sculpture ever survived, if there were ever any, originally. The few glimpses we get of history's most prolific killer come in prose, and nearly all of those are wildly contradictory. Most accounts that describe him, they say he is tall and powerful, with a flowing mane of hair and always a long bushy beard. One of the most surprising descriptions of Khan comes from courtesy of the Persian chronicle Rajdi al-Din, who claimed Genghis had red hair and green eyes. As strange as this sounds, these striking features were not unheard of among those ethnically diverse Mongols. Number 6. The origin of the Bell-Beaker folk. The Bell-Beaker folk were one of the most important cultures in ancient Europe. Wherever they turned up copper weapons, bronze jewelry, advanced archery equipment, and their iconic bell-shaped drinking vessels would appear. A warfare-like stock, they were primarily bowmen, but were also armed with a flat spearhead of copper and a curved rectangular wrist guard. They were the forewarning of the Bronze Age. In ancient Britain, they even redesigned Stonehagen. They seem to just appear out of nowhere, although we can trace aspects of their culture back through the ages. They tend to appear in places where it doesn't make any sense for them to be. Their extensive search for copper and gold, in fact, greatly accelerated the spread of bronze in Europe, and can be used to answer why they have appeared in so many different places. Because of this, it is said that they could have been not a single culture, but a cross-cultured phenomenon. It is thought that they were possibly originated from Spain and Portugal because of the DNA found in the Beaker folk buried in Germany. Number 5. The reason for Constantine's conversion. One of the greatest mysteries of the Roman Empire is that of the religious conversion of Constantine. Constantine ruled the Roman Empire in the 4th century, and his shocking conversion was the catalyst that turned Christianity into one of the largest faiths on earth. Prior to Constantine's conversion, the best treatment Christians could hope for in the Roman Empire was indifference, instead of prosecution. One of the best known stories passed down by Lactius, Constantine's advisor and a famous author, claimed that Constantine had dreamt the night before an important battle, and it was interpreted from a Christian standpoint. On the other hand, Eubius, a Roman historian, says a vision of God appeared above the battlefield, demanding Constantine decorate his shield with the symbol of Christ. The two writers also not only disagree on what caused the conversion, but on where it took place. There is also the issue of whether there was a dream or any vision at all. Plenty of scholars over the centuries had suggested Constantine's conversion was more likely not caused by genuine faith, but because Christianity was a popular religion among the soldiers. Number 4. Why Harold Wilson resigned. On March 16, 1976, Prime Minister Harold Wilson did something that has never been repeated by a British leader. Erratically, with zero warning to his government, he took to the airways and announced his resignation. This action affected and set course to British politics for decades. When Wilson resigned, James Callaghan became Prime Minister and proved to be incredibly incompetent, on such a level that a virtual nobody who went by the name of Margaret Thatcher managed to carry the next election. Without Wilson's monumentous decision, we can expect that the modern UK would be a very different place. Although Wilson claimed that he wanted to give Callaghan a chance to settle into the role of being Prime Minister, his unpredicted action makes it so that almost nobody believed him. The government of the time was unstable and only had a majority of 3 in the House of Commons. The last thing it needed was more instability. There are many theories and conspiracy theories as to why he resigned, ranging from early signs of Alzheimer's to knowledge that the M15 were planning a coup. To the date, none have been proven to be true. Number 3. Why the Romans built their border wall. For the first 600 years of its existence, Rome was in a state of continuous expansion. Romans fought wars, conquered nations, and gained territory that stretched over a far wider area than the current European Union. Then in AD 117, expansion stopped. Scotland was abandoned to the barbarians, and the empire froze. In the place of new territory, gigantic walls sprang up, circling the lands. Common sense would tell us that these walls were to repel invaders, but common sense would probably be wrong. We know from the garrison reports there are virtually no references to fighting on the British frontier, and few anywhere else. In parts of the empire, the walls were nothing more than a couple of tiny shacks holding 3 people, many miles apart, which was hardly enough to stop barbarian invasions. Today it is thought that these garrisons were less defense and more about controlling valuable trade routes, yet even then, we're only guessing. Why build something as impenetrable as Harid's wall just for trade? The billeting of all the available men at the frontiers let the barbarians sweep over the empire once they broke through. So the reasons for the walls would help us understand why Rome finally fell. It would also teach us a thing or two about our own border walls. From the US-Mexico wall to India's border with Bangladesh. Number 2. Nearly everything about early Anglo-Saxon times. The question for historians is always how reliable a source is. This stops us from accepting hoaxes at face value or drawing important conclusions from the ravings of madmen. But what if the ravings of a madman are all you got? Welcome to the study of the early Anglo-Saxon Britain, where everything we know comes from the writing of a single deranged monk. Gildas was clearly insane. Obsessed with the end times, his only major works was a screed writing against the post-Roman kings of Britain, condemning them for their excesses. This screed is our only contemporary account of that period. It is so full of holes that it just creates more mysteries. Of the 5 kings Gladys rails against, we know almost nothing about 2 of them, or how they fit into the lines of succession. Since most of what we know about the other 3 comes from Gladys himself, it is impossible to tell what is true and what is propaganda. Then there's Gladys's habit of simply omitting vital information. At one point he mentions a bone-breaking battle between the Britons and the Anglo-Saxons, which ended with a British victory under a great leader. For reasons unknown, he leaves out the leader's name. Finally, there's this simple fact that there must have been whole battles, armies, and royal families Gladys didn't even think worth mentioning. Names, dates, and places now utterly lost to history. As far as sub-Roman and early Anglo-Saxon Britain goes, we're in the dark. Number 1. The Princes in the Tower. While we're on the subject of Shakespeare, did you hear that Richard III's body was found earlier this year under a parking lot? Many new revelations about the reviled king have resulted from that find, but it still doesn't settle the question of what happened to Richard's 2 nephews, Edward V of England and Richard of Shrewsbury. At 12 and 9, the boys were locked into a tower of London in 1483, supposedly for their own protection. They were never seen again. While there is no direct evidence that they were murdered, it's certainly the obvious conclusion. Richard III is a prime suspect, but he's far from the only candidate, as there were plenty people in the boys' lives with motive. This eerie Paul de la Roche portrait of them perfectly captures their haunting disappearance. Got an idea for a top 15s list? Be sure to leave it in the comments below. Also, be sure to subscribe for future videos. And make sure to check out Top 15's original channel for more great videos. It's in the description below.